Maybe I heard it, maybe you didn't.
I don't think I heard it.
Maybe we've got a pretty special guest on line too, Brett.
All right, let's go to the phone lines. I believe we got Ben Obamanu on the phone with us. Ben, thank you so much for joining us tonight here on Sportz Blitz.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Well, Ben, first of all, I definitely have to say this, coming as a former Auburn Tiger, as you were, and being able to look and see what Auburn's been able to do in the last 3 years and finally get over the hump and win a national championship. And you guys were so close when you were there at Auburn. And just talk about where this program is on the Plains first before we dive into other topics.
It's pretty good. I think everybody was proud. I think, especially in my class, when you think about back to 2005, that season when we went undefeated and didn't even get a chance to play for the national championship, it means that Auburn, has gotten the respect it deserves. I think the SEC conference has been the conference that has been thriving in college football for the last 5 or 6 years. So for Auburn to be able to get that same respect that it has gotten, especially last year, 2 years ago, we won the championship, pretty much says a lot about our program where Gene Chizik has taken it. Gene Chizik and Jay Jacobs have done a great job with that program.
Well, Ben, Luke Robinson here, and I know things in the NFL in terms of free agency and trades and where players go changes day to day. It's a very fluid situation, but I'm assuming you're still with the Seattle Seahawks. And what do you think about things coming up with Seattle, and how good do you think their draft was this past year?
I think our draft's pretty good. I know we took some criticism for not drafting some big name guys and jumping and reaching for different people. We took a defensive end from West Virginia and Bruce Irvin, and we also ended up taking Russell Wilson, a quarterback, in the 3rd round. But the thing about it in the draft, you sometimes I think a lot of teams get called into getting the best available players. I think Coach Carroll up here in Seattle and our general manager John Snyder had an idea of getting the players that we actually need. A couple of years ago, we were a 7-9 team that made the playoffs. The first time in league history that a team with a losing record made the playoffs. We actually also ended up beating the defending champions in the New Orleans Saints. So it was one of those things where they realized that our team wasn't as far off as some of the other teams that had some high draft picks. So they wanted to get specific people, and they did a good job of that. So overall, for our team, we were all satisfied by the players that we added to the team, because they are really players that we actually need to be successful, not just players because they were good college players, but actually players that are going to come in and contribute.
You mentioned Pete Carroll, and it's kind of ironic that you're playing for him now, because you talked about that 04 team, and that Auburn team, of course, went undefeated. Oklahoma was undefeated, and they played an undefeated Southern Cal team for the national championship, and Pete Carroll was coaching that team. Do you and he talk about that at all, and what would have happened if your two teams would have played?
Yeah, we talk about a lot. I think Coach Carroll, he also brought in a lot of his USC staff, and he also brought in a couple of USC players. So at one point, the only people on the team when Coach Carroll was here was myself and Will Herring from that 05 team. So we had to take the brunt of going against up to 20 USC guys versus the 2 Auburn guys, and no Oklahoma guys on TV. So we always joked about what would have happened in that game. And quite frankly, Coach Carroll even mentioned a couple of times that maybe they should have played Auburn because Oklahoma wasn't too much of a competition for them anyway. But and it kind of came up again not too long ago when they started talking about vacating some wins from that season, and the whole Heisman Trophy with Reggie Bush. There's a lot of cloud going around that season for USC. So we still joke about it all the time, and we still sit back and say that we really want them again. We played them a couple of years before and lost to them 2 years prior to that, but we really felt that team that we had was a pretty good team. So we always joke about it, and I still joke with him today that the reason why I'm still a Seahawks playing for him now is because he knew deep down inside that Auburn would have gave USC a great run.
Well, we've got Ben Obamanu on the phone with us from the Seattle Seahawks, former Auburn Tiger. And Ben, the talk in college football has been stirred back up, and that 04 season for Auburn has been one that I've heard used several times over the last week and a half on why there should be a playoff in college football, especially with the top 4 teams, because if there would have been a 14 playoff that year, Ben, you guys would have had a shot. You guys would have had a legit shot with Southern Cal, Oklahoma, and Utah that year. It would have been a 14 playoff, and you would have had a legit shot. So where do you think the scape of college football is going, and do you think it's going in the right direction?
I think it is. I think especially with I think number one, it's a lot of money involved in college football with the bowl games and the bowl system. So, money pretty much drives everything. But as you can see now with everybody trying to get the super conferences and the mega conference, even with the SEC adding Texas A&M and Missouri. Everybody's trying to get these big conferences, and schools recognize, the small schools recognize they need to get into a big conference to actually have a legitimate shot. Now, the schools that are already in the big conferences still recognize that they pretty much have to go undefeated and wait for, a computer system or some coaches or, writers to be able to determine who actually gets into the national championship game. I think it's becoming a little bit too complicated to have a clearer picture, because every year somebody can make a case of they should have won, they could have won, or they at least should have played in the game. So I think it's getting closer and closer. But I think when you think about the D2 schools and D3 schools, they have their tournaments. It's worked out pretty well for them. But I think a 14 tournament would pretty much work best. There is no perfect science, but that 14 tournament will at least give some kind of stability and some kind of reason to say this one team stood the test of time and actually played and actually won a championship and rose to the top of the order.
Ben, let's go back and talk about Seattle for a second. I think one of the biggest questions in the NFL this coming season will be what's going to happen with Seattle and their quarterback situation. What kind of update can you give us?
It's been kind of weird. I know, Zavarius Jackson from Montgomery, Alabama, a good friend of mine, was our starting quarterback last year and played through some injuries. And quite honestly, he didn't get a fair enough shake as many would think. He had a shoulder injury that he played through all last year. He had the youngest, I think probably one of the youngest offensive linemen in the league. He had, I think, three rookies that actually pretty much started, and a couple other guys. I think we only had one guy on the team that was one guy on the offensive line in that rotation that had over 5 years of experience. New offensive coordinator, no lockout season. So there are a lot of different factors that came into it. And this year we ended up, signing Matt Flynn, who was a highly touted free agent this year, and then we also threw Russell Wilson in the mix in this upcoming draft, drafted him in the third round. So right now for our team, Coach Carroll here in Seattle is of the ideal of competition. Everybody works for it. Nobody's going to get handed a job, and he wants to have 3 great quarterbacks. And that was his whole idea going to the offseason, is to put as many great players in that backfield as he possibly could, and then let them battle it out, because at the end of the day, you'll be stuck with somebody great. So right now I think it's going to be a competition. We start our first day of practice today, and then all 3 guys rotate with the one, so they take turns. And, we'll see which guy stands to the top. But for me as a receiver, it doesn't matter who throws the ball. As long as we throw the ball a lot and that quarterback can go in and throw for 300 yards a game, it doesn't matter for me. As long as I, as a receiver, can go out and contribute and help them to be the best quarterback, it's pretty much as the receiver standpoint that we take it.
And as long as they're throwing it towards your side of the field, right, Ben?
That's the main thing that matters. At the end of the day, you don't know what quarterback is throwing it until you just see the ball coming your way. So we want all guys to be successful, because you recognize in the NFL, as you all know, the starting quarterback can easily turn to the second quarterback, and the second quarterback can also, for some reason or another, go all the way down to the third quarterback if injuries and things like that happen. So it's pretty much a good problem to have is to have, a couple good quarterbacks on a roster to be able to figure it out.
No doubt about it. We've got Ben Obamanu from the Seattle Seahawks on the phone with us tonight. Ben, a couple more things before we let you go. The NFL has been in the spotlight during the offseason, not for playing football, but for a lot of things that went on off the field and behind the scenes. And one of the things that's been highly publicized is the bounty situation down in New Orleans. And also now a lot of players coming out signing a petition about concussions and how it's affected their lives after football. And a lot of people have arguments on both sides that some of this may be blown out of proportion. Others say they're facts to back it up. And we'll go back and start with the New Orleans Saints situation. And what did you think when you first heard this break, Ben, or had you already heard a little bit about this before it became national news?
Yeah, we all heard about it. I think it's all NFL players. You all had that intent. I think even as a little kid, you pretty much know sometimes that a team has a star player, a team has that key player that if that key player wasn't there, if you contain that one person, you'll be able to have a better shot at winning the game. So whether it was money on the table to actually hurt a player or take a player out of the game, it's always been scheme-wise some kind of way to try to take that one player out of the game. So for us as a current NFL player going through that system and actually even playing the Saints a couple of times, I didn't necessarily think they did anything malicious. They, still played football, and they still went out and made some tackles and made some big hits that everybody likes, that everybody wants to see on ESPN, and quite frankly, it has become the National Football League today. So I just think it's one of those things where, quite honestly, a lot of people feel that the New Orleans Saints have become the scapegoat for their behavior because it has become transparent. It has, kind of become an issue where a lot of people didn't know about it. A lot of people weren't aware that it still, kind of went on. Nor that people recognize that, such large amounts of money were being placed on the table. Usually it's just a motivating type thing. Like if we can take this guy out, hypothetically, then we'll be at a better chance. I think the New Orleans Saints took it to another level and actually put some major dough on the table so that guys could actually have more incentives to do it. And that was the problem. So it's one of those things that's been around football. I think it'll still be in football. And the only difference is whether somebody puts those large amounts of cash up for it or not. Everybody tries to take out your key player, and on each team, they're going in, and you try to your best job to protect your players anyway. So.
And well, and that being said, Ben, Roger Goodell at the beginning of this season really made it a point that he was going to crack down on these head-to-head hits across the middle and illegal hits, and was going to do the best he could to contain this. And then I think that's why it kind of escalated, and New Orleans got the punishment that they got because Roger Goodell had already made it public that they're trying to cut down on this kind of stuff, and they were putting money on the table to try to hurt players intentionally. So with that being said, we move into the last topic, the concussion topic, Ben. And I'll ask you personally: do you feel like do you think this is being blown way out of proportion? How do you feel as a wide receiver? You've got to go across the middle. There's guys out there like Troy Polamalu and guys that are headhunting, wanting to take you out. Do you think football has gotten to be that unsafe, or has it really changed at all that much over the last 40, 50 years?
I think it's changed somewhat. I think what has happened now, if you look at the fundamentals of football, even when, my first couple years coming into the league, and just seeing how, playing special teams and having to be a receiver and having to learn how to tackle a little bit because you hadn't, made tackles in high school. It was one of those things where in the NFL, traditionally older guys and even some coaches don't teach you the fundamentals of wrapping up and keeping your head up to make a tackle. In the NFL, as you pay attention a lot, guys come in for the blow-up shot. They come in and leave their helmets, come in and try to hit you with the shoulder. All the wrong ways to teach you how to tackle. And I think that has changed over the years. Guys don't go back to the fundamentals anymore. But at the same time, I think it's really been one of those things where the technology and the advances we made in science have allowed us to be able to keep track of it a little bit more. I think guys have always been under the impression of if you were kind of dizzy and you're kind of banged up, if you could see how many fingers that the doctor's holding up, you can get back on the field and play. Now it's becoming a little bit more complicated where they have a baseline test that we do, months before the season even starts, and they do psychological tests and different brain scans to make sure that what a player is before the season starts. If he has a concussion and gets a big hit in the game, they actually have stuff on the sideline right there, then on the spot to sit back and say he's not, functional enough to play football. So I think science has made it kind of be blown out of proportion a little bit from where it used to be because now the technology and the science behind it says, yeah, these guys really shouldn't play. But I don't think football has gotten too radical. I don't think it's become too malicious. It's just one of those things that you just have to make guys a little bit more mindful, the defensive guys especially, a little bit more mindful that not only are you, may possibly hurt, a selfless or innocent receiver like myself. I never want to get big hit. But I think the most important thing is some of these same guys, especially on defense, are knocking themselves out, and they are the ones that have these problems. When you look at, studies on Gene Seau, other guys that have, have taken their lives for different reasons. It's one of those things where guys don't recognize that while they're out there trying to punish somebody else, they are also causing some of the same damage to themselves, or even more damage to themselves. And that has to be taken into account and be addressed by the NFL. The damage that guys are doing to themselves while they're trying to oppose their will of somebody else.
Well, Ben, before we let you go, and let me just ask you a personal question. How many known concussions do you know that you suffered since you've been playing football and through high school? I mean, back at Selma High School all the way through to the NFL. Now you've had a pretty lengthy NFL career compared to a lot of NFL players. So how many times do you feel like you've had a true concussion?
I would probably say even going back to high school, I would say 5 good ones. I think maybe out of those 5, quite honestly, out of those 5, maybe 3 I've actually been taken out and been told just to not go back in the game. 2 of the times I did a pretty good job where it was in between plays or a timeout, and I had enough sense to be able to answer certain questions and walk off and, say that I lost my breath instead of saying I had a concussion, or say that my knee was hurting instead of having a concussion. So I think that's the thing. We athletes are so competitive and so smart that we'll find a way to get back on the field at whatever cost. And at the same time, it ends up hurting us later on. So it's become one of those things, quite honestly, for a lot of us NFL players. A lot of guys are really taking it into consideration when thinking about the longevity of their careers and how long they want to play, because nobody wants to have those long-lasting effects when they're not playing football anymore. So I'm also doing the same things, making sure that I take better care of myself on the football field and off the football field as well.
Well, Ben, that's good stuff, and appreciate you sharing that stuff with us, and be safe out there, and look forward to having you back on the program again soon, but we really appreciate you taking some time out to talk about some of those topics with us tonight.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben.